the longer this lasts, the worse the picture gets globally. I think the Iranians have decided that rather than live on their knees, they're going to stand up even if it kills them. I think the Iranians have made it very clear that they will not meet Mr. Netanyahu's demands. So we have to understand that the demands President Trump stipulated are not our demands. They're Israel's demands as articulated by Mr. Netanyahu. This is the last act in the American theatrical production in the Middle East. When this ends, we will be finished in the Middle East. There will be no restoration of the status quo ante. We will simply get out. And everybody in the Middle East will want us out.
Well, everyone, we're very honored to welcome back into the studio Colonel Douglas Macgregor, one of the greatest geopolitical insiders that we have today. Colonel, welcome back to the studio.
Good to be with you, Cyrus.
Well, Colonel, I want to get your thoughts on the situation with Iran right now, because we are entering into day 11 of this conflict. And what's interesting is we saw a tremendous change yesterday in the oil markets. The futures got up to $120. That's when Donald Trump came out and said something to cool down the market, saying that, look, the Iran war it's almost going to be over. But then you had Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, basically contradict that and say that we're just at the beginning. I think there's a lot of confusion here, and this is why we need to turn to the experts like yourself. Give us a little update on what you're feeling here on day 11 as we're going into this insane conflict.
Well, I think the word insane is an accurate descriptive. You know, this thing was not supposed to last for very long, this particular operation. I think that's evident from everything that we've heard and seen. And I'm afraid that the White House has discovered that they miscalculated. They thought that between the decapitation strikes designed to eliminate leaders at all levels in Iran had failed, that they were going to have to do something else. And I think the something else is the question that they need to answer. And the most immediate answer is, well, we started this. Now we need to double down and do more damage. Right. And I look at many of my generation. These are the people that remember Vietnam. And unfortunately, they say, double down. We're not tough enough. We're not ruthless enough. We need to destroy more, kill more. It's not a good prescription for, I think, Iran. It's the size of Western Europe with 93 million people. And they have demonstrated thus far that they prepared pretty well to deal with what was going to happen to them. The only area where I think there is some measure of disappointment, serious disappointment over in Iran, is with the overall air and missile defense. They haven't been able to down very many aircraft, but they are shooting down lots of what I would call the terrestrial intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance platforms, like the Israeli Hermes unmanned system, the drone. The reason it's important that you shoot those things down is that they are sent in to confirm or verify what people are finding on satellite imagery and space-based observation. Before you launch major strikes and commit large quantities of munitions to something, you want to try and make sure what you're shooting at is real and so forth. We spent, I'm told, something like $5.2 billion in the first 24 to 36 hours. And we discovered subsequently that we shot a lot of decoys. We missed things. And one of the things that we were absolutely convinced, and this is another Air Force malady, unfortunately, that if you achieve air superiority or air supremacy over the areas of importance to you, that you're going to win. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of evidence to support that unless you have a force on the ground that can somehow or another exploit it or discount it as not being useful, whatever. So I think we're stuck now. And in a way, I think the evidence for the failure thus far of this strategic air and missile campaign was evident when you heard the Hegseth, Raisin Cane joint press conference. Hegseth makes a lot of statements that don't make a lot of sense, as you point out, that are somewhat contradictory and incoherent. But he wants to reassure everybody we're going to bomb everyone into Kingdom Come. I mean, essentially, that's his message. And that hasn't worked very well. Then you go to General Kane, and he's very much like an accountant standing in front of his spreadsheet. Well, we flew 5,000 strikes, we dropped X number of munitions, and we hit these many targets, and the things are going as planned. Well, you know, I lived through the Vietnam War, and I listened to lots of briefings like that over and over and over again, right up until we left, for all intents and purposes, about 1972, 73 timeframe. And we said we were flying this many sorties, dropping this many bombs. And of course, we lost. So I think you have two different campaigns. You have the U.S. campaign that's designed first to decapitate. That failed. Now it's designed to destroy. Destruction means that you hit what you can find that you think is valuable. In other words, if you can find launch sites or you can find a launch platform, you try to hit that. Otherwise, what do? You end up bombing things that don't move, buildings, infrastructure, because you can find it, you can identify it, then you can destroy it. On the Iranian side is we've got to survive.
Right.
That's the number one thing. If they survive, they win. That's not enough for us. We're the ones that have said we've got to conquer the place in order to win the war. That means unless they show up for a battleship Missouri-style surrender in the Persian Gulf, and I think they're now repainting the battleship Missouri with the USS Trump, towing it over through the Pacific and into the Persian Gulf. I'm kidding, of course. So that President Trump can meet them on the battleship and they can surrender to him. Unless you can achieve that, what do you look like? You look foolish. Right. And at the same time, if you look at the missile strikes, they're saying, well, we're firing less missiles. We're also flying fewer sorties. In other words, we've reached that point where, okay, are we having an impact? We're trying to reassess what is the battle damage and what difference does it make? On the Iranian side, they've done enormous damage. 27 plus U.S. bases completely destroyed. Virtually all of the long-range radars that are designed to give you early warning of an incoming missile attack in Israel and across the Gulf and the Arabian Peninsula, they're all gone. They've been destroyed. And now they're taking things apart. I was just looking at some satellite photography before I came on in Kuwait, looking at the U.S. base there. They obviously have excellent intelligence. They know where the CIA stations are. They know where people are located that actually perform tasks that are of importance. They're systematically dismantling our military capability across the Gulf. And they've made it very clear that unless you play ball with us, if you live in the Emirates or these other places, you continue to serve the American-Israeli agenda, we'll destroy everything else. And at the same time, the oil jugular is shutting down. Right. In Qatar, they have no more storage. They're stopping extraction. The same thing in the UAE. They just shut down the world's largest refinery. Why? Well, you can't refine anything else. What's the point? And you have 3,200 ships all over the world idle that are there to bring out oil or come in and load up, and they can't do it. And I thought it was interesting that President Trump said these people on board these ships must be gutless. Why aren't they running through the Straits of Hormuz? Well, President Trump, I got news for you. First of all, insurance companies won't pay for it. And secondly, these people actually would like to stay alive. I guess President Trump doesn't understand what's really happening. All in all, you've got a war without strategy, and that means a war without end. And secondly, you've got President Trump who, let's put it this way, Netanyahu's delusions of dominating the whole region and demonstrating Jewish supremacy there and worldwide are now Trump's reality. He seems to be committed to that, regardless of the cost to us, regardless of the cost to the world. So right now, 25% of the world's oil is offline, and it may be indefinite at this stage. And at the same time, 35% of the world's fertilizer is not on hand. You have to have the components from the Gulf in order to have fertilizer. Now, we can get fertilizer elsewhere, the Russians, maybe Ukrainians. I don't know if they're organized to do anything about it, but the Russians can sell you all the fertilizer you want, I guess. And then you look at the rest of the world, you look at Asia, and everyone is celebrating all the damage they think they're doing to China. You know, the idea being that, China has 100 to 115 days of net import cover in its strategic petroleum reserve. That's hopeful. We've stolen the oil from Venezuela. Venezuela isn't our state. We are not occupying it. We do not control it, but we can take control of their oil so they can't ship it to China. We see that as a big achievement. Right. And the result is that China is now forced to buy more expensive, transparently traded oil instead of the cheap reserves that they were getting. Well, at what point does China say, that's enough? We're not going to play this game anymore. What do they do? Do they intervene in the conflict? And then here, what we're seeing in Europe, it's catastrophic. The oil prices are rising without limit. Their storage has fallen now below 30% capacity. Asia, China, India, Japan, South Korea, you're talking about people that take 50 to 75% of their oil from the Persian Gulf. We were looking at an LNG increase this year of about 7%. Well, you can write that off. I think we've got real problems. We haven't even talked about rare earths that are effectively going to be out of our reach unless we do things differently. Not because we can't get rare earths, but we can't refine them.
Right.
And then in the United States, you've got to look at the very high probability that we're going to see electricity costs rise. They're all natural gas dependent. Higher gas prices at the pump. We could be paying $8 to $10 at the pump per gallon in another, 3, 4, 5, 6 months. We talked about fertilizer, chemicals, feedstocks. All of these things have a petroleum component, and we have to import some of this. Monetary policy, persistent energy-driven inflation is going to make it very hard for the Fed to cut interest rates. So on the whole, I think this is a global energy disruption that is going to lead us to energy poverty, at least in most of the world. And it's going to have a terrible impact. And how long will the entire world tolerate us?
Yeah. Colonel, thank you so much for that overview. And I think what I took away from that is just how connected so many different industries are. And we think of, just oil, maybe it's affecting gas prices, but it goes much more beyond that. It goes to almost every facet of our global economy. It's going to affect every region around the world. I mean, we're looking at yesterday, I think was very interesting, right? Donald Trump came out and I think he really tried to cool the markets down, and he tried to announce that, we're very close to achieving our goal. But no one actually has any idea what that goal is, right? We haven't really accomplished much in Iran to date. We've certainly took out the supreme leader, but essentially just replaced him with his 50-year-old son. So there's not really much of a change there. In the early days of the war, we definitely heard that the United States say that the goal was regime change. This was something we heard from the U.S. government, but now we've seen Trump flip-flop on that and actually say, I don't really care who's the leader. It's fine. Regime change is not what we're after right now. Does the United States have any idea what a successful campaign would be? Do we actually know what the Trump administration would consider a victory or a win here?
Well, that's an excellent question, and I think it's on a lot of people's minds. The longer this lasts, the worse the picture gets globally. I think the Iranians have decided that rather than live on their knees, they're going to stand up even if it kills them. I think the Iranians have made it very clear that they will not meet Mr. Netanyahu's demands. So we have to understand that the demands President Trump stipulated are not our demands. They're Israel's demands as articulated by Mr. Netanyahu. And what is Mr. Netanyahu's view of the world? The world is a place that Jews must dominate, at least insofar as we're talking about the Middle East. How do they dominate that? Well, they have to dominate it militarily. And why do they have to dominate it militarily? Because they're surrounded by enemies. That's the argument. Well, is there a way to convert some of those enemies to friends? No, that's impossible. Therefore, we will only be safe in Israel when Iran, it's a very serious danger to us because it's big. It has all of these missiles against which we cannot defend. And we're seeing that right now in real time in Israel. And that's unacceptable. So if nothing else, Iran has to be destroyed. That's his view.
Right.
And President Trump seems to have adopted it, but that's not our interest.
Right.
We don't have any interest in killing everybody in Iran or destroying all their cities and reducing them to abject poverty. I mean, surely that's not something that works to our advantage as a country. It's another civilizational state, for God's sakes. It's one of the cornerstones of global civilization. It's been around for 2,700 years. It's called Persia. And if we had stayed out of this place, I think you would have seen a regime change in Iran down the line. Maybe another 6 months, maybe 12 months, who knows? But the majority of the people in Iran really are not very enthusiastic about this brand of Islam that was imported from the Arab world. They haven't been for some time. And Iran itself has changed dramatically from what it was just 10 or 20 or 30 years ago. It's,
Correct.
we listen to the propaganda. It's like Khomeini's still in charge. It's 1980. Everyone runs around in a bag. The police are out there driving people into the mosques. No, the mosques are largely empty in the big cities. People are not interested in that. And they are very, very interested in regaining their Persian national identity, their Persian culture, history, language, society. Now, I think what we've done is retard that, if anything. We've made it very unlikely that we'll see anything profound in the near term. I could be wrong. It may be that in 6 months, we'll still get a change over there. But
Right.
bombing our way to that has been a failure, a disaster. In fact, I had someone sit down with me who's been to that country and showed me the neighborhoods in Tehran that we've destroyed. He said, we've killed most of the people that share an interest in expelling Islam.
Mm.
Of course, people we've been killing are the people that would really like to change things. I also think we don't understand Iran or the people in it. And that's not new. We don't care.
Right.
When we went to Vietnam, we understood nothing. We didn't give a damn. Our view has always been, well, we're here. We're going to bomb you into happiness and democracy. Of course, that's all nonsense. But that's been going around now for years and years. And you say, well, I'm not for that. So you're a traitor then. You don't believe in democracy. No, I don't believe in killing people pointlessly. No, I thought I learned that a long time ago.
Yeah.
Cyrus, I just think we're in a terrible position right now. I think we've probably run through most of the high-end missiles that we were utilizing. I think we started off with 8,000 or 9,000. I don't know what we have now, but I'm sure at least half of that is gone, if not more. The Iranians have at least 45,000 missiles left that they can deal with. And I don't know how many drones. I mean, somebody said recently 50,000. Somebody else said 100,000. The drones have turned out to be very, very effective.
Correct.
And again, a friend of mine in the defense industry called me and he said, I looked at one of these things and said, this is sheet metal. He started describing it. And he said, this thing is cheap as hell. And it's as effective as you can imagine. It works. Yeah. So now we're firing missiles to shoot down piece of crap drones. I mean, that's really what it amounts to. We are not prepared for this war. And there's no real strong base of support in the United States for it. I mean, once you get past my generation that is inclined, oh, yeah, get those guys, bomb everybody. Most people, especially under the age of 50, are saying, what are we doing?
Correct.
Right?
Absolutely. Well, I certainly think the issue here in the United States that people are really concerned about is cost of living. How are we going to make it here? The issues that are always going to affect Americans the most is obviously domestic issues. I think that's where the majority of people, like you said, under the age of 50, certainly in the younger generation, those under the age of 30, they're already stretched thin. They already have an unaffordability crisis. But I want to kind of go back to the next step of this war here, Colonel, because what we've been hearing over the last couple of days is that there is some rumors that a potential ground invasion is an option. I've heard some reports come out that Trump has been contemplating this. I think this could potentially be a disaster for the United States because I think if you're doing an air campaign and dropping bombs, it's a little bit less, but let's say it's a little bit more tolerable for Americans to tolerate because we're not putting our groups and our soldiers on the ground. But I believe that a ground invasion could be a catastrophic mistake for the United States. What are you hearing about the potential for this? And if the United States decides to pull the trigger and actually send in troops on the ground, what do you think would happen and where would this go?
Well, if we compare the United States Army today to what it was in 1991, when we put over 300,000 troops on the ground in Saudi Arabia before we launched into Kuwait and Iraq, our army is a fraction of that. You go to what, 440,000, 450,000? And of that number, how many of that number constitute formations? In other words, they're in organizations that you can ship and put on the ground somewhere. 120,000, 125,000, maybe. Now let's assume you're just dealing with what we've got. How do you get in? Where do you go? Where do you land? Are you going to land down on the coast of the Indian Ocean in Iran and then march 1,000 miles across open desert to get to the northern part of the country? I doubt it. Are you going to try and break through the Straits of Hormuz and come ashore in Bandar Abbas, the main port city down there, or go north up to Cargill and get in that way? Everything will be sunk. This is the problem. We don't understand. This is the age of precision guided missiles linked to satellite-based intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and terrestrial platforms. When we talk about seabed to space in terms of sensors, that exists. That's real. So how do you get in there? Well, I don't think you're going to get in the places I just described. So that puts you into the Mediterranean. Oh, well, that's great. We can go through Turkey, right? No. The Turks said no in 2003. We wanted to send 25,000 troops through Turkey. Said, forget it. We're not going to support it. Why would they support it today? They don't want Iran to be destroyed. They see no benefit in chaos in the region that'll produce millions of refugees, destroy their economy. They're not interested in the Greater Israel project. Israel is now invading Lebanon. It's controlling most of southern Syria. They plan to seize the Sinai and eventually part of the Nile River Valley in the north. They want to control most of Jordan and parts of northern Saudi Arabia and Iraq. Oh, everybody's going to rush to support that. That's the Netanyahu delusion. That's what we're bombing in support of. That's crazy. Okay, that is nuts. It's not going to happen. Yeah. So you say you're going to try and come ashore on the Syrian coastline. Okay, say you get in there. You're going to be picked up on intelligence, on space-based reconnaissance as soon as you show up in the Mediterranean. Right. While your ships are sitting there trying to offload equipment and troops are disembarking, you're going to be annihilated from space. Then somebody said, oh, we'll send in the 82nd. Oh, really? 11,000, 12,000 men in parachutes? Okay. What happens when they land, assuming they don't get killed in the air? Well, then they have to eat, they have to drink, they have to move, and they have to have ammunition. Right. So how long do they last? 36 hours? I mean, this is the myth, the mythology of light forces. Oh, they look great. They sound great. You put them down on the ground, they can't do anything. I guess what I'm trying to get across is it is not just a lunatic idea. It's a dangerous excursion into fantasy land. And to do all of it and have any real impact, you have to have a draft. You need to bring in able-bodied, top-of-the-line U.S. manpower. Now, how many people are going to sort of celebrate the draft when it's introduced?
Oh, gosh. That'd be a disaster, I think.
Now, listen, I want to be careful here because I want to make one point very clear.
Correct.
Most men, American men, if you told them, we're going to put you on the Mexican border because we have a threat from Mexico and we may have to go down there, they would all do it.
Correct.
There is no unwillingness to defend the United States and fight for it. But people are saying, well, what are we doing in Iran? What threat does Iran pose? Oh, if they get a nuclear weapon, they'll use it on us. There's no evidence for that. There never has been. They don't want to do that. After 2001, 1 million Iranians went into the streets of Tehran at night with candles for a night vigil to demonstrate their solidarity with us and their sadness at the loss of life in New York City. Have you ever heard that? Oh, no. Nobody ever brings that up. I mean, this sort of thing is so lopsided in the media, which is all Israeli infiltrated and supported and governed and run. You know, how do you deal with these things? We have too many people who have been propagandized for too long, automatically inhale this stuff. And so they're standing around saying, okay, you want to bomb a place, fine, but now you want to invade it? And how do we profit from this? Who's going to pay for all this? We're already $38 trillion in debt.
Oh, crazy. Yeah, absolutely. Colonel, I want to talk about something that happened on the very first day of the war, and this has become a very major story. There was an Iranian school that was bombed. 165 young ladies, unfortunately, lost their lives. About 40 minutes after that bombing, there was a second bomb that has come and hit. Now, reports have been coming out that this, in fact, was a Tomahawk missile that did strike that school. Now, of course, the Tomahawk missile is manufactured by Raytheon. It is a United States missile. There is no way that Iran could have gotten their hands on a Tomahawk missile. But we've seen President Trump deny this. We've seen him say that, it's possible Iran got a Tomahawk. We don't know what's going on. I'd like to get your thoughts on this matter, because I believe this is a major story that is really going to become a very big problem for the United States and certainly the Trump administration. What are your thoughts on this double tap hit that we've seen on the Iranian school and what this means for the future of the war?
Well, let's first talk about what I consider to be toxic, inflammatory rhetoric coming out of the Trump administration about Iran, accusing them of chopping off the heads of babies and, this kind of nonsense. In wartime, at all times, if you don't know, you tell people you don't know. You've got to say, I just don't know the answer to that question. It's under investigation. And when we know something, we'll tell you. There's nothing wrong with that.
Correct.
But I think President Trump and his contingent, whether it's Hegseth or somebody else, they're very anxious. Oh, no, we didn't do this, or somebody else did this. They're all afraid if they don't say that, there'll be a lack of support publicly for what they're doing. And that is something I saw with the air campaign in 1998 or 99 in Kosovo. Oh, we can't admit that. The Serbs didn't do it. We did it. Oh, well, we can't say that. Why not? If we say that, well, people won't support the air campaign. And a British officer said to me at the time, if our cause is just, why do we have to lie about it? He was right. Listen, if you can't tell the truth, it's best to say nothing. But ultimately, it's always best to tell the truth, no matter how damaging it may be. I mean, Churchill found that out during World War II several times, the hard way.
Right.
We did not suffer as much as the British, so we found out a lot of things later. But we've lied before about a lot of things. It's not a good idea. What we know is this, and based on experience, I can say this without hesitation. The airmen who are the targeteers in the Air Force are excellent. They labor night and day through endless quantities of satellite imagery to pinpoint targets, to identify the right targets. So I don't know how this happened, but I do remember that we bombed the Chinese embassy. It was a mistake. Right. That's all it was. It was a mistake. Nobody deliberately wanted to bomb the Chinese embassy. We did not deliberately kill these children. I am sure that was identified as a facility for some other purpose, accidentally or mixed up with something. Now, somebody said, do you think it was AI? I don't know. AI is dangerous because it's automatic. There is no human being that can hit the switch and say, wait a minute, let me check this. This is wrong. So I don't know that, but I can tell you from my experience with the Air Force, they do everything in their power to ensure the target that we are striking is a valid military target. Sometimes we stretch it. We'll hit a factory that makes automobiles or golf carts because we conclude, well, that has some military utility. Not true. We have done that. But that's not what this is. I think this was just a bold-faced error. Somebody mistook something for somebody else. And there are several layers of targeteers. Back in 99, you had 6 levels, dozens of people. And in other words, some Air Force officer doesn't walk in and say to the Air Force commander, here, sir, there's a picture of it right now. I think we ought to get that. No, that's not the way it works. It's scrutinized very carefully. It's a tragedy. I'm sorry it happened. But I do not believe for a moment that it was deliberate.
Right. I think I would agree with that. I don't think that they went out and did that deliberately, but I think that if you make a mistake, you've certainly got to own up to that. And I think the problem here is the denying that, right? If it's a Tomahawk missile, it's pretty obvious where that came from. We should be certainly owning up to that mistake. But of course, the honesty and clarity is not two strong suits of the Trump administration right now. Colonel, I'd like to ask you a little bit about this campaign. I mean, we've certainly bombed a lot already over the last 11 days in Iran. You mentioned earlier something interesting. All Iran has to do is survive. And you mentioned the effectiveness of the drones, that they have. I've heard some reports saying that these drones are thousands of dollars, maybe tens of thousands of dollars, but our missiles are sometimes multiple 7 figures. How is the United States doing in terms of munition? And are we running strategically low? I think that there was already a very low percentage of our munition, given the fact of, the Ukraine war that has been going on for many years. It seems like we're already very stretched very thin. We've talked about these missile interceptors for both the United States and Israel are running strategically low. How long do you think that Iran has to survive this? I mean, does the United States and Israel have, is it weeks, is it months left of military capability?
That's a shot in the dark. I don't have access to exact figures and data. So I would say a couple of things. First of all, at least at sea, the ships that launch these missiles, they're vertical launchers. They are vertical launchers inside submarines. In order to reload after you fired your magazine of missiles, you've got to go to a port. Right now, if you're south of the Persian Gulf, you've got to go all the way to Diego Garcia. If you're in the Mediterranean, you go further north and west to ports there. That takes time, and you have to know what you're doing. Missiles are easily damaged. So first of all, whatever you've got in your magazines, I don't know how much of it we've blown, but I'm sure a lot. And it'll become pretty clear that, some ships are going to have to go back and reload. Now, when it comes to aircraft, you only can carry so much at sea on board a carrier, and you're a long way from your target destination. There's a lot of refueling involved. We just moved a lot of refuelers out of Saudi Arabia. So we're moving further and further away from Iran because the Iranians have demonstrated their ability to reach out and kill us, at great distance. That's a problem. It's a logistical nightmare, to be blunt. And then you have the Air Force is in a little different position. The B-52s, the B-2s, they're in Europe and down in Diego Garcia or up in Great Britain. They can be loaded. They can shoot, drop, whatever they're doing, standoff, or drop. I guess they can drop gravity bombs. My experience with the gravity bombs, though, is that they really don't do much. Each 52, for instance, can drop 90 500-pound bombs. That's a lot. But most of the time, unless you have very, very accurate, up-to-date intelligence, you may not hit anything of value. Now, you could hit a city. You can blow up city blocks, kill lots of civilians. That's doable. But in terms of hitting the military in a meaningful way, not so much. Remember that the Iranians have a lot of underground facilities, much more than we realized, and with lots and lots of aircraft, lots of missiles and launchers down there. But that's what we're going to do. We're going to fly B-52s and B-2 bombers. Now, the B-2 bombers are going to launch more exotic munitions in some cases. They can all launch standoff, JASSM, cruise missiles and so forth. But again, at some point you step back, and I think we're doing this right now, and we're saying, what have we accomplished? What have we really done? And has it made any difference? You have to ask yourself that over and over and over again throughout a war, no matter what kind of war it is. I think we're doing that right now. So I would estimate that by the end of March, beginning of April, we'll probably be very, very low on a lot of things. Now, can we replenish in the meantime? Can we get something off the assembly line? We can't right now do a good job of surging missiles. It's not like a 155 artillery round. You can produce 100,000 of those in no time if you ramp up to it. You can't do that with Patriot missiles, standard missiles. These kinds of things just take time.
Yeah, absolutely. Colonel, we often hear that Western media portrays Iran as a very weak military threat, to the United States. But I think, as you've mentioned here, that the objective here is to survive. They have a lot of capabilities with these drones, a lot of underground missiles. What do you think is the biggest misconception that most Americans have about Iran right now?
I think there was an assumption that the Iranians were no different from their Arab neighbors. And the Arab neighbors are not historically a martial people. They do not invest heavily in military power. Most Arab states, most of the time, are trying to put food on the table and keep their populations from killing each other or being restive and overthrowing their government. Good example, of course, is Egypt. There are almost 100 million people living in Egypt, and they're still on an infrastructure that was originally designed for 30,000. So they've got huge problems. They've got to feed those people. It's an enormous challenge. And that's the largest Muslim Arab state in the world. Now, when you go to Iran and Turkey, you're dealing with different people, Persians and Turks. Both Persians and Turks have very long histories. The Turks are, again, thanks to the Ottoman Empire and many centuries of domination, they represent a civilizational state that is different from Persia, just as Persia is different from the Arabs. They are martial people. And I think the Turks, if they are engaged in a war, will fight you until everyone is dead.
Mm.
And I think the Iranians will fight you until there is almost nothing left of them. I do not think that we're going to go there because I don't think we can keep it up. I think finance, economics, all of these things will intrude. And I also think in time, as the truth begins to come out and we see that we too have suffered casualties, which we're not really talking about, and Israel in particular is very heavily damaged, and that grows worse every day. We just had the 33rd wave of missiles and drones hurled at Israel. It's done enormous damage again. The Israeli press censors everything. You can go to jail for showing evidence of any bombing at all while it's going on. So I think the real question here is, when does Netanyahu stand up and say, that's it? And to me, that's the greatest danger. Because when he finally says, listen, we can't put up with this anymore, he's going to say, I'm going to use a nuclear weapon.
Correct.
And I don't think President Trump has the authority, the power, or the influence over him to stop that. He should, but I don't know if he does.
Correct.
Because that will change everything.
Yeah, I mean, that was actually my next question. I mean, how worried are you personally, Colonel, that this could potentially go to that level, which would obviously be catastrophic for the entire world? I mean, how are you feeling about that?
Well, I don't feel particularly good about it because I think it would be a suicidal act for the Israelis because the world would desert them. We also have Pakistan. The Pakistanis have said they will provide a nuclear weapon to the Turks or the Iranians or anybody else against Israel. Right. That's been true for years. I don't think that's a good thing. In other words, I've always been of the mind that attacking another state that has no nuclear weapons by two nuclear armed states like the United States and Israel is a big mistake. Because I think it tells everybody else, if you really want to survive in this world, you better get some nuclear weapons. So I think we're producing the exact opposite effect from the one that we wanted. So I do worry about this. And I think the people that surround Mr. Netanyahu, they call them Likudniks, are a very radical group. They truly believe what they're saying. You have to take people at their words. They are describing the people that they're dealing with as, in other words, anybody who isn't Israeli and is not Jewish as subhuman.
Yeah. Colonel, when you look at the broader geopolitical landscape, we're looking at Russia, China, energy markets, and global alliances. Who do you think is the biggest beneficiary of what's going on right now in the Middle East?
Well, if there is a beneficiary right now, it's Russia.
Right.
And the crisis, the energy crisis in Europe is particularly acute. And I think Mr. Putin has been waiting some time now for the governments in Europe to turn over, because the majority of people in Germany are absolutely fed up with the government. It's true in France. I think it's true in England. I think it's true in Scotland. So the question is, in his mind, I don't want to fight these people. I'm just going to wait. In the meantime, I'm going to sell oil elsewhere into other markets, and the biggest markets are Asian. And so he's doing that, and he's making, billions. So for all of the geniuses that were trying to use Ukraine to destroy Russia and harm Russia, they've destroyed Ukraine. It's probably not even going to exist anymore as a viable nation state, given the losses they've sustained. They've told all these lies about how Russia has failed and Russia's lost. No, Russia's been very successful. But he's preferred to exercise patience and wait for things to fall apart rather than expend large numbers of Russian lives to make them fall apart.
Correct.
I didn't always understand that at the beginning, but I think in the history of Russia, no one has been more concerned about Russian life than Putin, which is, I pay tribute to the man for that, because his predecessors certainly never felt that way.
Correct.
But bottom line is, no, Russia is coming on top. And I don't think, I thought perhaps President Trump yesterday, when he called Mr. Putin, was going to say, look, we've got to focus down here in the Middle East. I want to wrap this up in Ukraine. I'm pulling all American advisors in and out of uniform, everybody in Ukraine out. I'm ceasing any more aid to Ukraine, stopping equipment, stopping cash from going there. I want to settle this. So if this is going to happen within the next 24 hours. When that happens, call me and we'll start talking. I'll send a team over. We'll sort the territorial arrangements out. That's what I would have done. So let's stop screwing around with this dead end in Ukraine, which has become a bottomless pit for money and resources. Stop fighting Russia and find a way to end this thing in the Middle East. But that didn't happen. And I don't see anybody thinking like that.
Yeah. Colonel, one last question for you today. Do you believe that the United States is making the same strategic mistakes that we did in Iraq and Afghanistan? Are we preparing ourselves for another, forever war? I mean, we were in Afghanistan for 20 years. Is there a chance that the conflict goes down that similar road?
No, because I don't think we can finance it and sustain it economically. But I think what we are doing is that this is the last act in the American theatrical production in the Middle East. When this ends, we will be finished in the Middle East. There will be no restoration of the status quo ante. We will simply get out, and everybody in the Middle East will want us out. I mean, if you're living in the Gulf right now, what have we demonstrated? We can't protect them.
Right.
Our deterrence has failed. So what good are we to them?
Well, very, very powerful way to conclude our interview today. Colonel, I want to just say thank you so much for being a great patriot, and thank you for coming on the show to educate our viewers and all of us about the truth about this war and conflict. And I'll look forward to speaking with you again in the future. And thank you for everything you do.
Oh, thank you, Cyrus.